from the closing bell on Wall Street, the Tuesday trading session, and what the difference out of the gate and up like a rocket. Just off the top of the day, but still very impressive. We'll watch closely in this final hour to see how much of this gain can be sustained. And it's not just the narrow market. The Dow is up, the S&P is up nearly 2%, and the Nasdaq roaring ahead. It's 2.4 over 7,600. So the three major indices are all sharply higher, and these are what's the reasons of driving the day. Tech stocks, they bounced back, and as we showed, the Nasdaq, the best day since March, and Netflix results still to come this afternoon. Healthcare stocks looking as fit as a fiddle. Strong earnings from United that powered the Dow ahead. United Healthcare, of course, and those bumper bank earnings, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, it all added to the cheer. In other words, the market seemingly shrugging off tensions because of Saudi Arabia. We'll talk about that this hour. Because live from the world's financial capital, New York City, it is Tuesday, October the 16th. I'm Richard Quest. I mean business. It's corporate America to the rescue. Investors are throwing off the malaise of the last week and juiced up by strong corporate earnings. I showed you in the market minute. The three major indices are having their best day since March. All 11 sectors of the S&P are higher. The Nasdaq is the best of the three majors, with investors looking to Netflix earnings coming after the bell. Just to put some numbers and perspective to you, the Dow is now year-to-date up some 4%. The Nasdaq year-to-date, it's now still up 10.2%. Ted Weisberg is with me from the New York Stock Exchange, the founder of Seabolt Security. Look, as you go into the last hour, first of all, is it your feeling that the market holds these gains as or do the sellers move in towards the close?
Well, it's a great question, Richard, because this is the most critical time of the trading day, and there is a tendency to see a reversal, whether we are down on the day or up on the day, when we get into this last 35, 40 minutes. So the real test will be where we are between 3:45 and the close. And my guess is that we're going to hold these gains, and we have a good shot. You know, we have been up as much as 500 just about 20 minutes ago, and I think we have a reasonably good shot at closing up, you know, at the 500 level, if not higher.
It's worth asking and explaining, why is this last hour so critical? What does happen in the last hour that couldn't have... I mean, there's no new news, there's no new facts, there's no new sentiment. So why does the last hour become so volatile?
Well, I think it's primarily attributable to day traders and active traders, because there's a tendency as we get towards the last hour of the trading day, certainly even the last 20 minutes of the trading day, for people who are trading more aggressively to flatten out their positions, cover their shorts, sell their longs, and basically try to position themselves for the next trading day, either going home flat or, you know, whatever the case might be. So you tend to get a lot of changing of the deck chairs, if you will, in this last 20 or 30 minutes.
Let's just hope it's not the deck chairs on the Titanic. All right, Ted Weisberg, we'll watch it. Stay not too far away. We'll watch the closing numbers in the last hour. Now, it was a busy day. There were plenty of undercurrents in terms of the real business, which means we need to look at business on the move. Now, it may be valued at $120 billion, according to IPO proposals from the banks. That's Goldman and Morgan. Now, that could set a record, and as looking at the taxis versus the black cars, who knows? It could be more than double the recent valuations. Volkswagen has ordered and been ordered to pay $926 million over diesel emissions. The diesel that has been everywhere in terms of cheating at Audi. VW is warning earnings will be affected. The German car makers still badly affected by the scandal. And so Goldman and Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley both reporting strong revenues. Now, it was revenues from equity trading that rose, and the shares of both were up sharply. That's your business on the move. Paul Monica is tracking all the earnings that we've got for us.
I like the pig you had on the conveyor belt there.
We're making no comment. The issue first of Goldman and Morgan Stanley. Equity trading, what do we mean by that? Because they're not trading for themselves.
It's not as much proprietary trading.
So when we say they made the money from equity trading, what do we mean?
Commissions from trading stocks, obviously. Fixed income, also another part of their trading business as well. Commodities. I mean, these are still broker-dealers. They're not just investing their own money anymore. They are investing other people's money.
And the M&A, the old investment banking side of the business, which has been so lucrative, but there's been so many deals. One of the best years for deals in many a year.
Yeah, M&A, there has been a pickup, and that's been very beneficial to Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, but also IPOs. We're starting to see a return to the IPO market where private companies are looking to go public, and that could get even better in 2019 as everyone is really hoping for the big unicorns like Uber and Airbnb to potentially go public.
If we look at the way in which we've had United Healthcare as well, excellent results.
Yeah, this was a broad-based rally that we have so far.
That's the point.
It's not just the bank earnings. United Health, Johnson & Johnson, healthcare has been a sector that people are starting to look at a little bit more closely because of its defensive nature too. Those dividend yields are very attractive.
Give me some dividend stocks that are doing well as a result of what's perceived to be a rotation out of tech and out of the flavors of the month and into the solids.
Yeah, well, definitely United Health and Johnson & Johnson. Those are two dividend payers right there. I'd keep an eye on Coke and some of the other consumer staples companies. And then not to talk our own book, but AT&T, the owner of CNN, pays a pretty hefty dividend as well. So does Verizon, obviously.
If this rally continues through the next few days, is that likely to reverse the rotation out of tech, or at least taking the cream off the top of tech, and we see people going back towards the riskier stocks, or not? Is there a feeling that it is best to stay at the lower end?
Well, I think what's going to be interesting, Richard, is that in the next week we're going to get those big tech companies that start to report earnings. So you might have a rotation back for the right reasons. If Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, et cetera, if they all report good results, then they should be going up.
When do we hear from Netflix?
Netflix is after the close today. A lot of people hoping that the subscriber numbers are finally starting to creep a little bit higher. They were a little disappointing last quarter.
Good to see you, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Relations between two of the world's most influential economies are at a crossroads. President Trump says he has now spoken to the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The US President just spoke with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who totally denied any knowledge of what took place in their Turkish consulate. He was with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo during the call and told me that he has already stated and will rapidly expand a full and complete investigation into this matter. Answers will be forthcoming shortly. Today in Riyadh, perhaps surprisingly, it was all smiles between the US Secretary of State and the Saudi Crown Prince. It comes at a time of a Turkish official now telling CNN that the body of the missing journalist Jamal Khashoggi was cut into pieces after he was killed 2 weeks ago at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. A senior national security advisor says Donald Trump's next moves could be the most consequential of his presidency. There is potential for the fallout should the US move ahead with the sanctions. Some predict oil prices could skyrocket to $200 a barrel. In reality, the US has been importing less and less Saudi oil. The other one, of course, Saudi Arabia could stop buying weapons from the United States. Right now, according to Brookings, its Air Force depends entirely on American arms, but that could change. And the kingdom could use its large holding of US Treasury bonds to cause trouble. That could also hurt their own portfolio. Sam Kiley is following developments in Riyadh, joins me now. We will leave the commercial stuff to others. Let's focus to you on the statement of the discussions between Pompeo and both the King and the Crown Prince. And now the President saying he accepts the denial, or at least he says the Crown Prince gave the strenuous denial.
Yeah, that's one of Donald Trump's characteristics, isn't it? He made the same remark when he spoke to Vladimir Putin in the Helsinki summit. A denial forcibly delivered seems to be convincing to Mr. Trump. But there may be something else going on here, given that we know from our own sources that the Saudis are trying to work their way to coming up with some kind of a statement that would admit a degree of culpability in what now appears to be a murder or an accidental death followed by dismemberment, reportedly, but at the same time protect the highest powers in the land, the King and the Crown Prince. So it's very, very hard to this all out at the moment. We do know that there's been something of a delay on that, though, Richard, in making that statement. Right.
Now, John Defterios is also with me. And the issue there, John, is the credibility of the Saudis making these statements, having said that they denied for the last 2 weeks. I mean, does it not, John Defterios, beg a belief that they didn't know what was going on in their own consulate and couldn't have found out pretty quickly?
I would agree 100% with you, Richard, and also the idea that it took so long to give access to Turkish investigators to get the investigation going, and also what President Erdogan had to say about the tampering with toxic materials and perhaps painting over the evidence. But I have to say, what stands out for me tonight is the tweet that you were talking about there and reading out from Donald Trump, suggesting that he's taking yet another leader by his or her word here, suggesting that Mohammed bin Salman didn't know anything about it whatsoever, and said he's going to proceed with the investigation. Right. He wants to give it more time. This is perhaps the most important decision of his administration so far. And, you know, Sam would say the same. The implications for the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran are grand. He has to handle it with a firmer hand than he's putting forward today.
Stay with me, both gentlemen, Sam and John Defterios. John Sfakianis is the Director of Economic Research at the Gulf Research Centre. He is in Athens, joins me now. The situation, you heard me outline the economic situation, but we've gone beyond threats and re-threats. If this is the line that the Saudis take, is it sufficient, do you think, for everybody else to continue business as usual?
Well, business as usual is going to continue as long as everybody thinks that Saudi Arabia is an opportunity. It is the largest economy in the Middle East. There are hiccups, and now we are in a big hiccup. It is a low in U.S.-Saudi relations. But we have seen in the past that over the last 40 years, there have been lows and highs. And Saudi-U.S. relations have recovered. This is not an easy moment. But at the same time, if Saudi Arabia wants to do business and the rest of the world wants to do business with Saudi Arabia, there has to be a silver lining in all of these things.
Do you accept there has to be, though, a punishment price that has to be paid?
Well, I'm not the adjudicator here. I would say that Saudi Arabia needs to go forward with the investigation, needs to be transparent, governance has to be there. As Saudi Arabia has been doing all these things over the last 2 years on the economic front, I think it's important that they talk to the rest of the world.
If Saudi pushes oil to $200 a barrel, that obviously hurts everybody, but it also ultimately will hurt themselves.
Well, first of all, I don't think that Saudi Arabia is going to push for oil prices at 200. They're not suicidal. And I think that this talk about using oil as a weapon is something that is preposterous. I don't think that Saudi Arabia is going to resort to such a thing, Richard.
John, thank you very much indeed. joining us from Athens. Much appreciated. We needed that aspect as we put a full picture together. Sam Kiley in Riyadh, back with you, sir. This interesting question that John Defterius was talking about, this denial by the Saudi Crown Prince. People are saying that the president is accepting it. But as I read President Trump's statement, he's not saying he accepts it, more that this was just a total denial. Or am I trying to pass something that really it doesn't need passing? We seem to have had a problem there with Sam in Riyadh, who suddenly can't hear me. We'll come back to him in a moment if we can. John Defterius, you heard the question. President Trump isn't saying he accepts the denial. By the same token, he's not saying he doesn't accept it.
Yeah, but Richard, he sounds like a reporter that's not providing any analysis. He's basically saying, I had a phone call. The gentleman said he's proceeding with the investigation as fast as he can, that being the Crown Prince, and saying we have to basically take him on his word at this stage. He's also, the Crown Prince, trying to create some distance between, of course, what transpired in Istanbul and this rogue group of killers perhaps playing out, and his responsibility for it, Richard. I think many have to test the Crown Prince going forward, particularly if the U.S. and Saudi relationship endures like it's done for decades, for him to take responsibility for what happens in his embassies. He has consolidated the power. And it also raises the question about how much more involved, Richard, King Salman's going to get here. He has a very competent cabinet around him, but perhaps it's the spreading of the wealth amongst other players in Saudi Arabia, not the concentration only with the Crown Prince as we see today.
John Defterius, thank you. Sam Kiley, back to you. You can hear me now. John very kindly answered the question for you, so I'll come back. He got there first. So I'll come back to you. Look, Sam, you're in Riyadh. You've covered the region for a considerable time. Not a question I would normally ask, but tonight, with all of this going around, briefly, what to you is the most interesting aspect of this story as seen from the Saudi picture?
Well, I think, Richard, that the most interesting aspect, and I don't want to sound too clinical about this, we are talking about the death of a human being, but on a strategic and international level, you get these cycles. It's happened before with Saudi Arabia. You'll recall, you may be old enough to remember the documentary called The Death of a Princess, which caused a very catastrophic breakdown in relationships between the United Kingdom and a much younger Saudi Arabia over the execution of a princess for alleged adultery. These things happen. These things move forward. At the moment, it is a very catastrophic moment in history between the two countries, between the United States and Saudi Arabia in particular, but there are many other nations that have been vocal in their demands for transparency over this. Things will move forward in the end because realpolitik comes into play, and Saudi Arabia, whatever the discomfort people may feel in the outside world, is a vital Western ally, and it is not a nation that can be or should be pushed in any other direction, and that would be the analysis of the more hard-headed diplomats around the world, Richard.
Gentlemen, honest politics brought in with business, which is exactly the situation we need to reflect tonight. Gentlemen, thank you. We will continue. It is Crespin's Business live from New York.